Hello, and welcome back to the Wheel Talk podcast. My name is Abby Mickey. This is a podcast about women's professional road cycling, and today is a big one, the Tour of Flanders. I am joined by Gracie Elvin.
Hey, this is going to be a big one. I reckon this is going to be not just about our favourite race, but I think this might be our favourite podcast episode, hopefully.
Our favourite podcast episode would be if you were also sitting here, because I have Loren and Abby next to me.
You didn't introduce me first. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for like Gracie to go, oh, good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm back in Girona sitting with Abby. It's been a long time, I think 2.5 years or something since we saw each other physically. Yeah. Not on the weekly basis. And I realized we have actually similar eye color. Now that I can see
we're sitting so close together.
A lot has happened in that 2.5 years, so it's nice.
Oh man, so much. Yeah, big because two of us are physically in the same room, but also because we had a lot of really incredible racing last week. We had Dwars, Vlaanderen on Wednesday, and that was a phenomenal race. And as Gracie was just saying before we started recording, we all were like, oh man, what a good race. Can't wait to talk about it on the podcast. And then the Tour of Flanders happened on Sunday, and boy, did that top, any race I've ever seen. Plus, we had big news out of the SD Worx-Protime camp that we're going to dive into. And unfortunately, we had some amazing questions on the Discord that I think we'll try to get to, but we do have a limited amount of time that people want to listen to us talk. So, without further ado, let's dive into Dwars first. Let's get it out of the way. So, Dwars on the Wednesday, it was a super aggressive race. There was a lot of attacks that went. There was a neutralization for about 30 minutes with 46 kilometers to go due to a car crash that happened in the men's race. It also meant that they took out 2 climbs from the women's race, so severely impacted the finale of that race, but didn't impact the excitement because we had attacks nonstop from the moment the neutralization ended. Shirin van Anrooy was the most notable attack as it made the race winning move. Marianne Vos went with her. SD Worx-Protime was really caught on the back foot, and when the select group went, Lotte Kopecky bridged solo while Demi Vollering was suffering a mechanical behind. So she was pretty much taken out of contention, the defending champ taken out of contention due to a mechanical. And then when it came time for the finale, it was Vos and Shirin. Vos took her 250th road win of her career, and Shirin van Anrooy took second, and there's a beautiful picture of them. I think congratulating themselves because they are my fantasy team, so saying we got Abby some points, we can feel good about ourselves today. That's definitely what they were saying as they crossed the finish line. And all in all, a pretty good race. Letitia Paternoster won the sprint behind for third, which is we'll definitely talk about her this episode. And was another great race for Puck Pieterse and Elise Longo-Borghini.
Oh, well, yeah, Trek they just capitalized on their own strengths, but also maybe what was going on in the bunch. And I think first and foremost, it looked like they had a plan and they stuck to it and they stayed focused, particularly after that disruption with the neutralization. And you could just tell that SD Worx had been on the front foot. There was a breakaway established that got stopped because it wasn't more than a minute ahead of the bunch. And so they didn't get that advantage back when they started the race, and it was like they'd fallen asleep. But yeah, I think that's a really good example of so much can happen in a race. That stuff doesn't happen as much, but say you crash or have a mechanical, there's going to be stuff that disrupts you, and we'll talk about that from Flanders as well, that you have to just forget about it straight away, reset your race and your focus as an individual and as a team. And Trek just nailed that in Tour of Flanders.
Yeah, SD Worx said, one of the SD Worx riders said after the race that they had full control of the race until the neutralization, and then they just lost it after the neutralization happened, and you could really see it. And I think when we'll get to Flanders, I think when watching it, like Kopecky looked like she was really saving energy. Like she bridged across, no effort spent on her part to bridge across to that group as it went. And it was really Trek that forced that move to go with Elise Longo-Borghini and Shirin. And Kopecky was forced to jump across to them. But then when it came time for to chase down the move with Shirin and Voss. Kopecky just kind of sat up. She wasn't active in trying to pull that back. She wasn't active in reacting to Shirin and Voss going up the road. And like, you watch Marianne Voss right away, like you react, and nobody reacted to that move. And then behind them, the chaos that was the remainder of that group, it was close, but it was never coming back together because there was Elisa being in there meant that, you know, she was disrupting chases and disrupting moves that went. And at one point she went, which was a little bit of an interesting thing, but she pulled the pin on that pretty quickly and let Shirin have her moment up the road with Voss. But yeah, for SD Worx-Protime, I think what happened at Dwars was a bit of foreshadowing to how their day went on Sunday.
I think so. I was saying before the podcast, I missed the race, unfortunately. For some reason, Sportsa didn't show it, and then my Eurosport didn't. Anyway, so I missed it, but I can definitely comment on, I want to chat about what's happening with SD Worx-Protime. And I guess this year we're seeing less numbers in the front. So they've always had the monopoly, right? This year it seems to be Trek that has a dynamic duo of Elisa Longa-Borghini and Shirin Van Anrooy, who have been on incredible form the whole spring. And so they've been playing really well off one another, kind of what we saw with Lizzie Deignan and Elisa a few years back, when they had actually all that early sort of success, I think 2020, 2021-ish. But yeah, with SD Worx, I guess we're going to go into this a bit later, but without the numbers, I'm guessing, is that affecting them a bit in a sense that it was just always power and numbers? There's no Rusa. Rusa's had some really bad luck. We'll talk about that, but they haven't had the horsepower of Rusa this year. So, you know, again, I missed this race, but I can definitely comment on Flanders, but that's a big discussion now and then of course all the stuff that's having with transfers and what is the future of that team.
And Kopecky was actually a bit critical in her post-race interview at Dwars about like that she should have had some people more present in the front in those moments. So she wasn't specifically pointing anyone out, but it was pretty clear that she was annoyed at the team. And I think that was interesting too. Like, sure, Dutchies can be direct, but Belgians don't tend to be kind of like that in my experience. So I thought that was interesting as well.
I mean, especially the Wednesday before a big race like Flanders, if you have that kind of disruption in the team, like it's hard to get everyone back on the same foot before, like in 3 days before a big race, because tensions are going to be even higher already at that point after Dwars. And before Flanders, everyone's stressed before Flanders anyway. And if you have a race like Dwars and you go into Flanders already feeling a little bit annoyed with your team, man, that's not going to end well.
I think, Gracie, we've always discussed this, how it was, even in your career, a prelude to Flanders. Like, if you had good legs on the Wednesday, generally speaking, that was an indication of what we could expect to see on Sunday. Flanders is a harder race, but that was like, who's going to be on form? And that's why, actually, in our little chat, I was backing Voss if it was a group finish. And, yep. And that would have been good for you, but you know, my favorite, she won, she took it home.
I'm happy with it. Let's talk about Flanders, because I feel that this is a great segue into Flanders. Having good legs on the Wednesday meant good legs on the Sunday, and Marianne Voss was the one who was on the front when shit went to hell on the Koppenberg. And up until that point, there were breaks that went, but everyone really had their eye on the Koppenberg, probably rightfully so. It was wet, it was raining, the cobbles were wet, and we saw pretty much the same outcome as we saw last year, with a lot of riders having to dismount and run, including the world champion and Demi Vollering. There was a group that went over the top of the Koppenberg, including Kasia Niewiadoma, Elisa Longa-Borghini, Puck Pieterse, Voss, and Letizia Paternoster. They were able to get a pretty big gap, and behind them it was SD Worx-Protime. Oh, and Lorena Wiebes was in that group as well. She rode incredibly well over the Koppenberg. I was super impressed. And she just kind of got to sit on because her teammates were out the back. SD Worx-Protime really on the back foot for the Koppenberg, and actually Demi after the race was critical of Kasia Niewiadoma. for that happening, which we'll talk about. And it ended up that Demi was pulling for Kopecky to try to get back to that group. In the end, Demi just left Kopecky behind, bridged that group, but Kopecky got back anyway. And Shirin pulled like the most beautiful move I've ever seen a bike race ever. As the group kind of stalled when Demi got back on, Shirin just went straight past them, got like 18 seconds at one point, went into the Paterberg with a gap on the Paterberg. Elise Longoborghini and Kasia bridge to Shirin. So just after the top of the climb, they caught back on with Shirin. The three of them worked together beautifully to get to the finish. And in the end, Elise Longoborghini out-sprinted Kasia Niewiadoma to take her second Flanders after 9 years after she took her first Flanders. Behind, Marianne Vos won the sprint from that group. And SD Worx was left out of the top four, which is not something that we see very often in a big race like this. Can they pull it all back together before Paris-Roubaix Femme? I don't know. We might have foretold that they're gonna go like sweep the podium or something. Anyway, it was such a phenomenal race, and it was like all set up. You couldn't have written a better story of Dwars going into Flanders and how Lidl-Trek was just on it. They were incredible. I mean, even when there was that group, the group with Wiebes in it, like they didn't care. They did not care that Wiebes was in that group. They just kept playing the game. Everyone was riding so well. It was like the whole like demon that is SD Worx-Protime that hangs over the peloton. People just were like, nah, we don't care about it today. And SD Worx-Protime, they just had a really unlucky race, because you never want the race to end the way it did because of something like what happened on the Koppenberg. Like that kind of sucks. It is part of Flanders. I get that, but I don't want to see a race fall apart because a bunch of riders like crash into each other and have to get off their bikes and run up a climb. That is not how I want to see a race come. I would rather that they were able to outsmart SD Worx-Protime and outride them because they were better on the day, not because Demi and Lotta had to get off their bikes. And I think after the race, Demi said that was the moment that lost them the race, but I actually think that they didn't have the legs today. I don't think that they would have pulled that off.
Yeah, I think we can focus actually on the Koppenberg for a little while here. I went back this morning and watched the highlights, and exactly what you're saying, Abby, like if you look at where SD Worx-Protime were positioned, before, they would have been the team driving it into that climb, because we spoke about it last week. That was the key point in the race. It was debatable whether it should be there or not, but it's there. We knew what happened in the men's race. The women knew exactly what was going to happen. And actually, I bumped into some riders last night who had raced it, and I said, what's your view on the Koppenberg? And actually for them, they weren't in a good position, but they said, yeah, it was a race to the Koppenberg, and we knew it. We knew we had to be there, and if you weren't there, you weren't there. And if you go back and look at those highlights, I just think Kopecky wasn't the Kopecky of a few races before. She didn't look good, and she was so far back. She was really not where she needed to be. I mean, yeah, like you said, Vos was the one on the front drilling it because she knew she had to be there. And they're just lucky, actually, in that situation. Wiebes managed to get through, but that wasn't ideal for them, not with what was coming up. Wiebes is good, but with the form of a Trek, and we know how they race, they won two, it was always going to be hard for her to be underrepresented there. So I think they just weren't on a good day as a team.
Let's be clear, though. Kopecky looked good. I love the white bibs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she can be blamed for why it rained.
And Vanderpool.
Yeah, the two of them together. God damn it.
But yeah, I do agree with Loren, and that was something that we kind of picked up in the commentary earlier in the race, was that Kopecky tends to float around on her own anyway, but it's really noticeable on the big races in that SD Worx don't typically ride together as a unit. And often they don't have to, because they get strength in numbers, because they all get at the right place at the right time because they're all strong enough. But you see teams like Lidl-Trek and DSM do it really well as well. They really stick together as units at important points in time, and they look after each other. They do the lead outs into those important sectors. And I think SD Worx does it sometimes, but because Lotte Kopecky was just like this beacon of whiteness in the punch, you could really notice her where she was and where she should have been, but also where her other teammates were, which were not around her, or she wasn't around them. So, takes two there to make that unit happen. So, yeah, I was really noticing that in the earlier parts of the race too. But yeah, as Loren has said, like particularly leading into that Koppenberg, she was moving herself up. She'd spend energy probably at the wrong times and just didn't get it quite right. But they could have just done better as a group in that situation. And yeah, maybe she just has not, she was just off the peak. Maybe Ghent was her purple patch, her peak week, and she just didn't quite get the timing right. That's really hard to do, regardless of how many seasons you've done and all of that. But, maybe because she's coaching herself, that was a little bit of a factor as well, that she didn't quite get that formula right this year.
I've been saying this from the very beginning of the year, that her coaching herself is going to backfire, not because she's not good at it and not because she can do it, but because it's helpful to have that outside source, because you're always going to feel you can do more. And it's not the hard efforts that a coach comes in handy. It's the rest days. And they're like, you've done a lot. You need to take, we're taking a rest week. You're taking 3 days, easy riding or off the bike completely. It's like those days that make the difference. And I feel like, I mean, maybe it's just me. If I'd been coaching myself, I would have run myself into the ground. And I can say that for most of the pro cyclists that I know.
I agree. I think we were all sort of questioning how that would go. I mean, Lizzie Deignan is an athlete who's coached herself for a very long time, but I know that she has input from other people. So, and she's just a very experienced rider. But again, maybe that has played into it. Kopecky has been very good since the UAE tour. And what was that already? How many months ago? It feels like it's been months already since the start of the season. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes you have a bad day. But like you said, she did look good on Wednesday. But, yeah, we just won't know. But she didn't have that extra edge to win Flanders. And everything, actually, exactly what Gracie said last week, everything all the pieces of the puzzle need to come together on that day. And if there's one piece missing, quite often you can't win the race.
I mean, I'm fully prepared to eat my words, and she's going to be totally fine at Paris-Roubaix, and she's just going to ride away and win. That is entirely a possibility that she just had a bad day. Yeah. That could absolutely be what happened. But I do think what fed into that was the situation at SD Worx-Protime, because on Wednesday during the race, the news came out that Demi Vollering is definitely not staying with the team at the end of the year. In a bizarre move, Danny Stam, the team DS, told the media during Dwars that she wasn't going to stay with the team, that it was really between Kopecky and Vollering, and they went with Kopecky, and they just didn't have the money to keep Vollering on the team for what she wanted, which I felt that it was a bit disrespectful, honestly, coming from team management to be that open about another their rider's situation. And also, can you imagine being Vollering, having that race and then opening her phone? That just sucks. So that was pretty bizarre, but we did find out that there is unrest in the SD Worx-Protime camp. It would be really hard to keep the morale high when you know that is going on. And now there are rumors that Marlon Reusser is also going to leave the team at the end of the year. So there's something going on within SD Worx-Protime, and it is no longer just the cohesive unit that we saw last year. And I think that we're seeing that in the races at the moment, and they'll probably get it back together. They're professionals, and at the end of the day, this is their job. And I'm fully ready for them to come into the the stage race season and just wipe the floor with everyone again. But at the moment, these races are so high pressure and there's so much anxiety and emotion on the line in these races that it's a little bit harder to put that in the back of your mind, especially before the race and when the races are so close together. So for Flanders, like Demi was pretty blunt after the race about her role in Flanders and what impacted them. I do agree with Loren. Like they were too far back, and to throw Kasia under the bus and say that Kasia did something weird that knocked them off their bikes is a bizarre thing. But she's also Dutch. They're very blunt, and in such a emotional moment when the race didn't go your way and you had all the eyes on you. It's a completely human response, and so I'm not taking anything away from or I'm not taking anything from that and saying that Demi, I don't know, isn't awesome, because we know that she is. But yeah, it all kind of came together to be, not their day for many different reasons.
I'm actually I want to touch on what you were just talking about, the dynamics of a team, and we have spoken about this before, but I was chatting with a DS last week and we had different opinions about compositions of teams. And this DS's opinion was, I don't care who the rider is as long as they perform. And I was like, but what if certain riders, sometimes you have a rider come in or there's a huge change in a team and we see the team flourish, or actually you see it go the other way. And I would argue this year, what's happening, like you said, with SD Worx-Protime, something isn't quite right. It's not the same. Whether or not they liked each other last year, it didn't matter, that it was still gelling. So it was working in the races, but at the moment it just doesn't seem to be gelling. And like you said, there are going to be riders leaving, but this DS's argument is the women are getting paid enough that they need to just suck it up and get on with the job, regardless of how you feel about a situation, and that's it, it's done. Just focus on the job. But I was like, I think there is some emotion involved, and that's not just because we're women, or is it? We're different to men. You can't put us in the same category just because in the men's team, if they hate each other, they still seem to get on with it. So I was just curious to gauge your opinions as former racers, women, and just experts in cycling.
This is a great way for me to not be able to cut Loren off when she's speaking. Gracie, you go.
I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit on this one. I think in the past, team culture in women's cycling was a big pillar of how teams operated, because there wasn't money there and you had to come and do your hobby as a profession and just not get very well paid for it. And so having really good team culture was what kept people around, kept people loyal, kept people wanting to, show up and do their best, of course, for their own reasons as well. But I found that loyalty was a really key value for female cycling a while back. And less so in men's cycling. But now that we've seen that big change in the salaries for women's cycling and that it's like a proper profession and a career now, which is awesome, I think you do actually need to suck it up sometimes and just be a professional. And you don't need to like your teammates, but you just need to respect them and come and work together in a good way. But having said that, I think that there still needs to be good team culture. And I think that's where management has the responsibility on their shoulders. And I think some of those words that were coming from Danny Stam were actually unprofessional, and he shouldn't have been the one to be adding to the fuel of what was going on in that team. I think as a manager or a director, you're the one that needs to be setting the team culture standards. And so I found that the most interesting thing that was coming out of that team, because of course you're never going to have a team that all love each other, especially now that there's good money involved. And, results actually really do matter for lots of other reasons than they did in the past. So of course you need to manage people and their egos, and that's your job as a manager or director.
I agree to a certain extent, because it used to be a much bigger deal, and now it is shifting into being an actual profession where you make a living doing it, which was not a thing in the past. But I think that that world in which women weren't making money is still so fresh that there is still a huge crop of women in the peloton who have internalized that feeling that you do need to respect and get along with your teammates in order for them to sacrifice for you. And I think that there are riders on SD Worx that would feel that way and would have lived their whole careers up to this point and in a different environment than, say, Kopecky, who's relatively new to the peloton-ish. I mean, she only really broke on the scene in 2020 was when she won that stage of the Giro, I think. Her first win outside of Belgium. So I feel like we're in a shifting environment right now in so many different ways, but this is one of them where there still needs to be a cohesive environment within a women's team. And I actually think that part of it is because we're women and that women are inherently more emotional. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think it's also what makes the racing more exciting to watch. It's what makes the players more like just incredible people that you want to cheer for, like Kasia, like Elisa Longa-Borghini, like the passion and the emotion that they show, and even Demi, like the emotion that they show is one of the reasons that we love them so much. And a lot of times you can get interviews like from the men that are really emotional, and it's always just such an awesome moment in men's cycling. But for women, we've been so long in this state where like it has been a passion to be in the sport. It's not just going to evaporate because now we have salaries and it's only the top women that are making those salaries in the first place. You have riders on SD Worx-Protime that are not making that much money, that are still working on the minimum, and they're still going to feel that they need to be like, part of for lack of a better description, a sorority, to feel part of the team. And so I feel like a lot of it is, I don't know. I don't think that because we're women and we're more emotional and we get more invested and we have in more tears that I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't think so
either.
Yeah. It's, I think it does mean that it is more important in women's cycling to have a cohesive environment than men's cycling. Yeah. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I wouldn't want to work in an environment where I didn't like my colleague.
And we do know a lot of men cycling that doesn't have great team culture, and they're not that happy, but they just kind of suck it up and they ultimately hate their career and they just want to leave the sport completely. So, yeah, I think it's a strength in women's cycling, like you're saying, Abby, to be having some female feelings, emotions. It's not a dirty word. It's actually a strength, and in some ways, it's made this last few weeks more entertaining for us.
Better for the podcast. I think, team culture is definitely if there's a point to walk away with, it's that there has to be good team culture. And I think the last year that I raced with Gracie, actually, do you remember, Gracie, we did that. It was like constructive feedback. We had to learn how to give each other. It was just feedback. But what happened in the race, you said what you had to say on the bus, and then it was done. But it wasn't like you were attacking someone. It was just basically at the Koppenberg, I was at the front with Gracie, and you were meant to be at the front, but you weren't there. Can you explain to me why you weren't there in that situation? So not attacking someone and going, for fuck's sake, you weren't at the front and you messed up the race, because that goes nowhere. Someone shuts down when you do that. But I found that really useful. Yeah.
Well, I hope SD Worx is listening.
Yeah, work on a good feedback model.
I mean, I do think that looking at the two teams that we are focusing on today in Lidl-Trek and SD Worx, that of the two teams, the team with the better environment that we know of at this moment is Lidl-Trek. I mean, they are buds and they're really gelling on and off the bike. And it's a huge bummer that they lost Lizzie so early in the race. And she broke her arm, so she'll be out for a minute, which is a massive bummer, especially with the goals she has in mind and where she is in her career and the stage of her career that she's in. So super unfortunate that they lost her early on. And I think they had been hoping that she would be up there and be another number for them. But in the end, they didn't need it. And Shirin and Eliza are just so seamless together. And there was a lot of pushback on Eliza bridging up to Shirin and bringing Kasia with her. And I think we need to talk about that moment, because that there have been moments in the past where a teammate does that and it ends poorly and it wasn't a good call. And you could have been watching this and watching Eliza attack the group that she was in to bridge to Shirin. And if she'd brought Demi with her, that would have been a terrible move. But in that moment, Demi was already struggling. She was cooked. She'd been trying to chase all day and she did not have the legs. Eliza making that move, in the group that they had at that moment, there were 3 SD Worx-Protime riders in Wiebes, Kopecky, and Demi. And there was 1 Lidl-Trek rider off the front and 1 Lidl-Trek rider in that group. Eliza getting up to Shirin meant that they had numbers at the front of the race, and maybe SD Worx had 1 more number at the back, but they didn't have the legs to back it up. So it didn't matter that they had 1 more number. So Eliza kept them on the front foot by bridging to Shirin. Whether or not Shirin would have come back to that group, I think she would have. They were gaining time on her on the Koppenberg. I think that they would have been too close in that 13-kilometer run to the line for Shirin to stay away. Or it would have been just close enough that they would have caught her at the line, in which case Voss would have won the race. RIP, my fantasy team. And Eliza being on the front foot, and she got the okay from the DS. It wasn't like she was riding against her own teammate. She got the okay from the DS and she bridged up to Shirin, and it worked in their favor to have those numbers up front. And it was great that Kasia was willing to work with them. And I think, like, when it came down to a sprint, they did everything that they could to put themselves in a good position. And it was just whether or not who was going to have the better sprint. And Eliza has the better sprint. We know that. So they played the race perfectly. And I want to push back on the criticism that Eliza rode selfishly, because of course she rode selfishly. She's a team leader. Like, she's always going to ride selfishly. But she rode selfishly in a way that was beneficial to Shirin as well, and beneficial to the team. And if Kasia had won that sprint, then they would have fucked up. But that didn't happen. They still won the race. And so it was a good move. And we saw Eliza do a similar move in Dwars, but pulled a pin on it because it wasn't working. And so they did the same thing at Flanders and it worked. And so I did, there are some criticisms that you can make of people's tactics. And this is one that I firmly will say is not a valid criticism of Eliza Lange-Borghini's tactics on the Paterberg.
100% agree as well. As soon as she went and they got a gap as they crested over the Paterberg, you were like, yeah, that was clever. And I think she would have set up if Voss was directly on the wheel, or anyone from SD Worx was directly on the wheel. She wouldn't have ridden Voss across to have 2 versus 1. But the fact that it was Kasia, she knew that it was most likely that they could both beat her on the line, or at least one of them. So I think, yeah, I 100% back that move as well. I think that was smart. And from her interviews, you could understand that was one of their plans before the race, and a plan that they also had to kind of make on the fly as well. And yeah, getting support from the team car, but also probably having talked through a similar scenario before the race. I don't think that Shirin was let down at all in that scenario. I think that she had set that scenario up perfectly. And yeah, kudos to the probably what will be the attack of the year, perfectly timed moment, and had the legs to back it up all the way over, not just up the Old Quermont, but the Paterberg as well. Like, what an exceptional ride. So I thought it was brilliant.
I don't have that much more to add other than, yeah, the fact that if we look at what happened in Het Nieuwsblad, Eliza and Shirin were there, and the only option they had in that situation with that run-in was they were going 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, because they knew if it came down to that bunch group sprint, they just didn't have the rider to podium, actually. Because we can talk about riders like Paternoster who have been getting over the climbs and having a phenomenal spring. Voss, you're just not going to beat her. And, you know, she was in good form. So if you had taken Voss, if they had done nothing on the Paterberg and crested, and they had been cohesive and brought Shirin back, what would they have had? They would have done the old classic 1-2, 1-2 running in. And we know nothing much gets away. You might get lucky that there is that slight hesitation from the group when you get towards that 1 kilometer to go, because we've seen that happen before. Someone pulls it off, but you don't want to risk that. And I think they just knew Elisa was on a brilliant day. The attacks she was putting in were just that much better than everyone else. And Kasia was on a good day. And, you know, they've been racing each other a very long time. If you have Kasia with you, you know she's going to work, because the same thing for her. She would rather get second than go to the line in a group of 10 and come 5th or 6th.
Yeah, and I think if Elisa hadn't bridged up to that move by Shirin, we would be sitting here talking about a Voss victory and how Trek had the best legs on the day and failed to execute a good plan. So I think it was absolutely brilliant. But we have to talk about Kasia, because we've been critical of her in the past, her tactics in the past. Never her. But we've asked ourselves why she does certain things in the past. And I think we saw a completely different version of Kasia Niewiadoma in this race. Yes, she threw down an attack or two. It didn't work. She pulled the pin. She sat in. She saved her energy. And she used that energy in the finale to get second, which is one of the notable results of her career, second at Flanders. She's got some incredible wins on her palmares, but she's at a point in her career where you would expect her to be getting better results, and the second at Flanders is just phenomenal for her. I was thrilled to see her get second. I was thrilled to see how happy she was at the finish, because it's not always about winning, and of course she's racing for the win, but she's also when you can't win, racing for second is the next best that you can do. And so she did such an amazing race, and I think that there was a turning point in Kasia out on the Tourmalet last year, where we saw her put in that incredible attack, and we know the form that she has, that she can get to, and what she can accomplish. And she went into this race and she didn't just uselessly attack. Love to watch it. Like, I don't want her to change, but I just want her to like funnel that energy, you know, because she's so good. And she did that, and it was just like phenomenal to watch. I mean, that group of three, you were watching that group of three go to the line, and it was like, Kasia could win, I would cry. Elisa Lamborghini could win, I would cry. Shirin would win, I would also cry, because she's on my fantasy team. So it's just like, I feel like Kasia was one of the breakout performances of her career, in my opinion, at least her career where it stands now, where she needs to adapt her tactics to match her form, and she did that on Sunday. And it's only a matter of doing that again in a race in the future that, you know, Elisa Lamborghini is a bit on the back foot, and she's got to win.
No notes.
Thinking in my head, Abby, you had a great weekend. You had a great week. Your fantasy team. I'm surprised you haven't like retallied the points here.
I mean, I think I had a great week emotionally, but I think when you actually retally the points, you still won Flanders.
I did win Flanders. I won Flanders.
And lastly, on Kasia, her sprint was great too. Like, she held her nerve in the last kilometer, and I don't think she really made any mistakes. Actually, I want to be critical of this last kilometer for Trek. I think Shirin can actually take some learning points away from that last kilometer. I think that she needed to just pick one side of the road. She went from side to side a couple of times, and I think that's dangerous. I think they got away with it because it was Kasia, no disrespect, but she needed to just pick a side and do a good lead out and learn how to sprint in the drops.
That was, yeah, I was screaming at the television because of the angle, and I was like, what are you doing? Just ride. Like, now you just need to ride, and Elisa's just got to come off the wheel when she feels it's the right point to sprint. Because actually, Elisa, it was Kasia who jumped first. She went right, and then Elisa went left.
Yeah, and for a few seconds I was like, oh my God, Kasia's going to win.
Yeah.
Especially with that camera angle.
But yeah. No, I agreed.
I wouldn't be able to speak on the podcast today. Okay, I would still have not a voice.
Is she in town at the moment, or is she still up there for Roubaix?
I would be surprised if she was doing Roubaix, to be honest. But I don't know if she's here or in Andorra, because they split their time. She did text me back yesterday, which I was like, oh my God, you found the time to text me back. But yeah, oh man, I would not be able to speak for a month. There would be no podcast, because I would try to host and it would just be silence
I want to see her win a stage of the Tour de France this year. Yeah. Anyway, we could go on about her for a while. Slightly in love, but whatever.
Can we talk a little bit about Voss? I think she actually could have done more as well. I think that chase group was very lackluster in the end. Kopecky and Demi didn't look like they were committing 100%. They were probably just really gassed by that point, to be fair. But Voss was foxing, I think, and I think she arguably was the biggest loser of the day, not SD Worx.
Yeah, that's a good point, Gracie, because usually Voss would be the one who would be rallying everyone, because who else was skipping turns at points? My partner picked it up. Letizia. It would have been that point where it's like there's that moment where it could come back or you lose the race. There's always that like slight moment, and when you see the hesitation in the group, and then it really needs to come from essentially a Voss to be like, this is Flanders. If we don't work, there is no podium at all. Like we're not even sprinting for a third here. It's gone. The whole race is gone. So you've got to commit and then just hope for the best. And I agree with that actually. I mean, again, like we said, SD Worx-Protime not on a good day. So they were chasing all day actually. And they lost Weavers. I mean, she wasn't there.
Yeah, and if you're in that group, and Voss should have known best out of that group, is that you can see everyone's on their knees. Like, she's not bringing a fresh Demi and a fresh Kopecky to the line. She's bringing fucked Demi and fucked Kopecky to the line. So, like, it's worth it. I was actually surprised that, maybe Voss was on her knees as well, but, like, it's just, she looked quite good, and I was just a bit, like, frustrated for her that she wasn't doing more in that group. And also interesting that Demi and Lotto weren't exactly going ham either.
That's fine. Voss is just biding her time to win Paris-Roubaix Femme avec Zwift so that I can bunny hop Matt in the fantasy league because I am no longer last.
I know you're listening to this. You're in fifth, buddy. One of my riders has 0 points this year, so.
Oh man, and one of your riders is out for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, Marlon Reusser went down in that early crash, like 10K into the race, and it sounds like it was one of those slow motion crashes that are always the worst, and she walked away she broke both of her ear canals, which I didn't know was a thing, her jaw, and 8 teeth. So she's going to be out for a minute, which is such a huge bummer for her and also for her team, mostly for her. But obviously mostly for her. It sounds like she's going to be back by the Olympics. At least that's the hope. From the statement from SD Worx-Protime, the big goals of the season, the Olympics and Worlds, are still on the table for her. But man, that's going to be. She has surgery, I believe, today on Tuesday as we record. But that is a rough injury, and the video of her was just like heartbreaking on the ground, and her and Lizzie both covered in blood. But poor Reusser, she was the biggest loser on the day, but like not loser because it has negative connotation. She was the biggest, like, I don't know, you just want to, I don't know, wrap her in a really fluffy blanket and give her a hot chocolate. It's just a Swiss hot chocolate.
You know, some seasons for some riders are just hell. And actually hers, with the illness, now this big crash, it's just, and in Olympic year, I really feel for her. It's awful. You don't want to see this happen to anyone.
No.
It's bike racing. I hate saying that.
It's true, though.
Yeah. It should be enough time before the Olympics, but that's pretty decent injuries, though. Like a broken arm's one thing, but what Reese has done to herself, it'll be
like
interesting.
Lizzie will be back on the bike in 4 days, probably on the stationary bike, which she's well accustomed to, having had 2 babies at this point and come back from that. So just back on the ergo for her. But yeah, for Reusser, it'll be some time before she's able to get back on the bike, I'd imagine. But yeah, Loren still leads the league. They're 5,505 points. Gracie's in second, about 500 points behind. And then we got Matt, Denise, and me pretty close together, honestly. I'm coming for you, Matt Deneve. And then Tills.
Golden ticket, Lotte Kopecky, letting him down.
Yeah, he thought he was going to really rack up the points this weekend. Too bad. So sad.
He has 2 riders with 0 points, with Marta Cavalli and Anna Henderson, and then Niedermeyer only has 5 points. But I think that those 3 riders, they're coming. They're coming. Lotto Visma Lisa Bike is really there's an Anna Henderson sized hole in their team at the moment. I think she would be making a huge difference for them at this point in the season. So it's a huge bummer that she's still out. But yeah, Voss is holding my team down. Voss and Shirin, my 2 best riders by a mile. I did really think that Pfeiffer Georgie was going to rack me some points up on the weekend, but she was there. She
looked pretty good in parts of the race, but didn't quite pull it together near the end, unfortunately. Let's talk about the other notable mentions for the day.
Please.
Oh, Puck Peters. She was fantastic. Like, it was cool to see her second wheel over the Koppenberg with Voss. To see old school goat and potentially upcoming goat coming together in front of all of the roadies. And then she was actually riding fairly mature. We've seen her maybe a little bit too active, and we've talked about that in other races, but I felt like she was really mature riding in Flanders, like the way that she was following some of the other top riders. She wasn't being overly active. I don't think you could, though, because everyone was just absolutely... I reckon this looked like the toughest Flanders, and as well as the best. It looked like I'd love to see the numbers from some of the riders, because it just looked brutal, as well as the wet conditions as well. But she looked strong. She looked patient. She made some interesting and good moves, especially at the end at the bottom of the Old Quermont. I thought that was a really smart move by her. It didn't quite work out, but I think it was really worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. She is such an exciting rider to have in the peloton. And actually, you mentioned versus the roadies, the non-roadies versus the roadies. Elisa Lange-Borghini actually mentioned in her post-race interview that she had done a bunch of mountain biking in the off season, and so when it was slippery on the Koppenberg, she knew to keep her weight farther back on the back wheel so it wouldn't slip as much, which I found fascinating. But yeah, a great ride for Puck, and I really hope she's doing Paris-Roubaix, because I think that this form that she has right now, obviously she has mountain biking coming up later on in the season, but she's missing Brazil already. So I think she is doing Paris-Roubaix, and I think that can kind of wrap up her first ever spring classic season, which is wild given how well she performed all season. And then she can move on to her other aims for the year, but it's been awesome to have her in the peloton. And I think her being here is only going to make the racing more exciting in the future. So it's fantastic. And then we had from UAE team Emirates. I wrote a piece actually about the 3 breakout stars of the season. It's on escapecollective.com if you want to check it out. But one of the riders in that group was Caroline Swinkles, and she had her teammate Sylvia Persico up there, who Persico breakout year a couple years ago, hasn't quite managed to get to that point again since, but the 2 of them did make it over the Koppenberg with that group. And Swinkles has been another rider this spring who she's been in the peloton for a while. She's one of those riders that came up with Park Hotel Valkenburg, and then she was on Visma Lisa Bike for a while, or Jumbo Visma at the time, and has made this move to UAE team ADQ. And I think that the move has really freed her up to try some things, and she's been active in a lot of the races, and she had a great race. And she was the only rider to react to Shirin van Anrooij's move when she went with, I think, 24-ish kilometers to go. She was the only one who saw it and reacted, but she just didn't react quick enough, and Shirin was coming with so much speed. But she did try, and she was kind of hovering in between with Puck for a minute there. And having her up there with Persico, I mean, having the 2 of them in that group just adds another team into the mix. And I think, yeah, Persico is not a exciting rider of the spring. I think we all expect a bit more from her, especially Matt Deneve. But she's getting there. Like, she was still there. She finished 7th in Flanders. Like, it's a great result. And I think having Swinkles on her side is only going to make her stronger.
And I think Paternoster is someone's going to grab her, snatch her at the mid-season transfer, huh? She's had a brilliant spring. It's actually great to see her up there again, because I guess when she broke out into the road scene, when she signed with Trek, she got that win at Tour Down Under, and she had some success, and then just a few years of really on the road nothing. And now she's moved teams, and it seems to be gelling, and actually she's carrying the results of that team right now. So yeah, team, I need to pronounce it correctly, Liv Alula Jaco is
like pulling teeth.
Yeah, I can't do it. I keep fucking it up on the commentary. It kills me. I keep saying I just say Jaco or Lula. I really need to. I think I get it right half of the time, hopefully. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Liv Alula Jaco. I'm sorry. I'm trying.
You said it perfectly then. But she's been brilliant, and I mean, to ride the way she did at Flanders, like, I definitely would have said she was a sprinter years ago. Like, you know, we talk of sprinters and non-sprinters like a Weebers who can really climb. So great season. Good to see her up there. I hope she continues as success for the team.
I want to give one honourable mention to the one Aussie that did anything, Josie Talbot. She was a last-minute call-up, I believe. Probably had the least amount of expectations, for me at least, but I'm sure from a lot of people, in how she would go at Flanders. And she did awesome. She was in that main breakaway for ages, and she actually looked strong. And yeah, I think she walked away with probably the most impact of all the Aussies for the day. So good job, Josie.
I did say to Josie, great ride yesterday. This doesn't need to go on the podcast, but yeah. She was enjoying a celebratory pizza after her amazing effort. So no, it was good to see her there. Always want to see the Aussie names up there, and I feel like this season so far, Nee Bradbury has definitely carried the Aussie flag. And hopefully on Sarah Gigante, of course. I'm curious to see. We've got the tours coming up soon. We'll be talking about that in the next few weeks, actually. And I think we'll see some Aussies shine a little bit more then.
And the Ardennes. I have no doubt we'll see Neve all over the races at the Ardennes. God damn it. Yeah. Yeah, we do have the Ardennes coming up, which is awesome. It'll be great races for Kasia, and she's clearly on good form. So that's good news for literally everyone on the planet. And with the way that Lidl-Trek is riding, they will be exciting in the Ardennes as well. And they've got their climbers probably coming in for some of those. Amanda Spratt and Guy Rialini are at altitude. So I would assume we'll see them come down for the Ardennes starting next week or the week after next week. But first, Paris-Roubaix fam.
I was going to say, don't jump the gun, man. I was like, we're talking about the Ardennes and we're still in the Holy Week.
Sacrilege.
Judas.
Which I'm so excited about, because I don't know if any listeners are going to be there. I will be at the Velodrome to watch the finish of the women's race. And hopefully see Trek take another victory.
Or Voss. Please be Voss. Please be Voss. Paris-Roubaix is going to be amazing. Gracie, are you commentating this one also?
I certainly am.
Yes. Also another win for everyone on the planet. Well, Paris-Roubaix Femme is coming, and it is going to be a great one. I have just an abundance of stories on the site this week about Paris-Roubaix Femme, including Peloton predicts, because it is the hardest race to predict of the year. So I asked some riders, what do you think is going to happen? And I got some phenomenal answers, and some answers that I was like, cool. And I did a massive story with Allison Jackson to come out this week with a special edition podcast episode. So later on this week, there will be an hour and a half Allison Jackson feature in which we both cry. And and we relived the entire day, the build up to the day, and everything with Paris-Roubaix. There were some awesome little pieces that I got to pick from her, like the fact that, you know, she it was the only race that the team kept mentioning to her, even as early as December camp, that they wanted her to be fit for Paris-Roubaix. And at one point she was sitting there and she was like, I think they want me to win Paris-Roubaix. So I got some really great little bits from her, and the piece is going to be on the site, I think, tomorrow as this podcast is released, so Wednesday, and it's a huge one. So check it out, share it with your friends. I really hope everybody enjoys it. There's also Gruber images in there, and their pictures are always just stunning. Loren and Matt Denif are going to be on the ground at Paris-Roubaix Femme on Saturday, so they are going to be the podcast for next week. Surprise.
Love surprises.
Congrats, Loren.
I'm promoted. Can I change my Instagram bio now?
Yes, absolutely.
And she asked for more money.
Yeah.
Are you listening, Kaylee?
Is there like,
I don't know if you do it anymore.
In the fine print, she put bonus in her contract.
Yeah.
My heart is so happy for you guys, but it's also so sad to not be there.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything. We covered that Demi is leaving SD Worx, which was pretty much the biggest news of the week. We have a minute we could speculate about where she might be going, because that's going to completely change the dynamic of the peloton where she goes. And I think, you know, honestly, it's all the better for us as viewers that she's going to leave the team. It takes away an option from them and gives a really good option to other people. So it's just going to make the racing more dynamic. And I think wherever she goes, she's going to add a huge element to that team. And a lot of people on the Discord were speculating about Canyon SRAM or UAE. Obviously good options, and there's been rumors about a UAE offer for her. I think Movistar would be on the table as well, given that they've had, you know, a rider of her caliber before with Annemiek van Vleuten. They know how to support a rider like that. So it would be if she was looking at teams and looking at who could support her in the Tour de France Femme, then she knows that Movistar can do that, because they've brought Annemiek to a Tour de France Femme victory before. And I think most of those big teams will be on the table for her. I don't know if Canyon SRAM is a viable option, to be honest, because I think that they are very invested in their young riders that they have coming up, like Niedermeyer and Bauernfeind. And they have Kasia still, although she's on a contract year. She's another rider who's at the end of a contract year. And that would be fascinating to see where she goes, because now SD Worx has a hole.
I don't see Kasia on SD Worx. I don't know. I know, again, professional cycling, it's about the money and whatnot, and you got to just do your job, but I just don't see her in those colors.
Can you imagine, like, we're going to be talking about the classics in like a little under a year, talking about Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, and Demi Vollering is going to be lining up in Movistar colors, and Kasia is going to be in SD Worx, and it's just going to be complete chaos.
I'm going to throw a conspiracy theory in. How about an Ineos Grenadiers team that's been built under the radar and with a lot of money?
That's not a conspiracy theory. That's truth.
Well, I mean, if Pauline Ferrand-Prévot is really verbalizing
post-Olympic year, you could really rack up with some good names.
Their men's team is floundering so much that they're like, we're just going to do what everyone else does and focus on a women's team.
Yeah, it's called pink washing.
Pink. I love that. But it's really a thing. I can totally see that.
Anyway,
watch this space.
That just popped into my head. Good work.
Do you remember, I think, was it the end of last year, we had to pick like what's going to be the biggest like the shock of 2024 or something, and I said Lizzie Deignan winning the Olympics. I don't know if that's
still possible.
Still possible.
I reckon it's even more possible now. She'll do a Heyman after this broken arm.
True. That has to be one of the most iconic Roubaix wins all time.
Although Mitch Docker on his podcast apparently was talking about if a Canadian had ever won Paris-Roubaix and said no. I take huge offense with that. Alison Jackson literally won last year, and it was like the most epic win of all time. Like, even racked up, like, even if you stack up her win against like some of the iconic men's Paris-Roubaix femmes, Paris-Roubaix, it was like it lands in the top 5. Like, that was just such the fact that she said before the race, this is how I'm going to win it. And then she just went out and she executed that plan to perfection. How hard she worked, how like, I mean, I was sitting at home like, oh God, she's doing too much. She's wasting so much energy, but she had control of that race from the word go and just was, she knew exactly what she was doing the entire time. Like it was.
Do you feel like she'll be one of those riders that she'll never top this? It's done.
I hope not.
Like, you know, sometimes when you get that, well, it's Paris-Roubaix. I know it doesn't have the history of the men's race, but it's like it's that, and then that will forever be the beacon of your career, which I'd be stoked with. I wouldn't care if I came nowhere else and won a monument.
I mean, I hope because she's on my fantasy team that she does get some results this year. But I also know from the interview that I did with her that she has tons of goals still in her mind. Like she wants to be the Canadian national champion until she retires. She wants to win worlds. She wants to win Olympic medals. So she's got huge goals. And I think like that the Paris-Roubaix victory is definitely a massive one, but there are also a lot of things that she still wants to accomplish. And for her, I hope that she can do some of those or all of them. Mm-hmm. Also, because she's just such a great winner. She's like an awesome winner. Like you have people who win races, like a little bit of behind the scenes of my job. You know, I've been trying to interview Demi Vollering for 2 years now and have just been shoved back at every turn. Like it's impossible to get that girl on the phone. And like Allison, I can just text her and she's like, yeah, free in an hour. And there's a level of, you know, that being my relationship with Allison, of course, like I've known her forever, but I also like there's a line between journalists and riders that I always respect. And of course, like you never want to put any strain on your friendships with riders as a journalist by asking them things and stuff. But there's also just knowing, like, there's also having a concept of what the media means to the sport and how you putting yourself out there to the media will impact your career and your teams that you're on. The following that you have, all of that is kind of all tied up in cycling, whether we like it or not. And when it comes to like trying to interview riders that just will not give you the time of day, it's a big bummer.
I think that's certainly something from the past. We talk about the now and the pre, was when women weren't really on TV and you didn't have access to these post-race interviews or just to watch the race. It was basically social media and journalists who could put women in the spotlight. And so personality actually was quite important at one point. And that's why we always said the women were just more interesting. There were more stories. They were happy to share a bit more. But I think that's definitely shifted. I guess as a journalist, you would see that a lot now. Like you've got to go through the media people, and some of the media people aren't so helpful or friendly.
Do not respond to messages. That's a bit of behind the scenes in case anyone was wondering. But Allison, like, if I do the proper thing and I go through the team, which they appreciate that, and I totally get it, then I can usually get her on the phone in like at least a day or two, and that's awesome. I just love that. I love that we have, you know, that access to her as someone who's won a big race like Paris-Roubaix Femme, and that she's willing to tell her story. It's really cool. A worthy winner in many different ways.
Looks like she just has fun as well.
Saturday. Yeah, she has so much fun. The dancing is just great.
I think she's a great role model in that she just enjoys the moment and enjoys what she does. And of course, she takes it seriously, but she doesn't take herself seriously. And I think that's actually quite hard to do as an athlete. So I would love to see her win some bigger races as well, but say Paris-Roubaix is her peak result ever, I don't think that she can walk away from her career disappointed, because I think she obviously won one of the biggest races you can win, but I think she enjoyed almost every other race, which not a lot of riders can say. So good on her.
We're going to get a new Paris-Roubaix Femme winner on Saturday. Who's your picks? Putting you on the spot.
The most unpredictable race.
I mean, like weeks and weeks ago, it was all about Kopecky. I mean, I told you, I've even got the mini world championship jersey. Still going to get that signed. She will still have to sign this, even if she doesn't win. It doesn't matter. It's for my son. It's more for me, I think, actually. Look at me. I've become a real... And for Hannes. Hannes is a Kopecky fan. He got his fan photo with her last year. I'm taking him and my father-in-law to the race, so that's my little gift to them. But pick... I want to see Puck Petersen win. You know, she's been there all season on the cusp. I hope it's a good day out. I don't want to see rain. I don't want to see epic crashes because I think it was the first edition was awful with the weather, and we just don't want to see that in a race like that. I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm going for Puck Petersen, and, you know, my heart also says Voss.
The weather is sunny on the day, but it's raining every single day up until. So the cobbles will be wet, but the sun will be shining. What a combination.
You know, the danger with that is the bloody puddles on the side. And I've only ever ridden a couple of sectors. Gracie, you've done full course recon, I think. But it's those deep ditches and you're not quite sure how deep they are. That's the danger of that. So if it is dry weather and then, you know, naturally everyone takes the sides, that's where we're going to see some of the shit hit the fan.
Yeah, literally.
Gracie, do you have
I was definitely thinking Puck as well. And also I would like to see Van Anrooy be able to have a crack because she's, you know, earned it. She has earned a big win this season, and I'm not sure if her form's going to quite stretch out for another week, but you know, I think she's capable of it. She's got the skills as well. So that would be a really nice way for her to be rewarded for all of the work that she's done for the team this year.
I'd be happy with that outcome, to be honest. I'm going to go Voss. I feel like Voss, she's got every single race that you could possibly win pretty much on her Palmares. Added Omloop, Het Nieuwsblad, and Dwars to that list this year. I think she just needs to add one more, and that's Paris-Roubaix Femme. And she will forever be the GOAT. She already is, but to add those two on to the completely ridiculous list of her wins in her career, I think it would just be right. It would be like when she wore the yellow jersey at the Tour de France Femme, the first edition of the Tour de France Femme of X Zwift, and everything just felt right in the world. Okay, let's wrap it up. Great episode today. Thanks, guys. This was so much fun. I wish we could just all three of us could be around this table and we could do this every week because, man, that'd be such a great time. But we'll wrap it up with what we're obsessed with. I'm obsessed with you guys.
Yes, stole my obsession. I'm obsessed with you guys. I'm obsessed with what today will be because the other member who is not a podcaster will be here with her beautiful little girl and wifey. So looking forward to seeing Taylor Wiles as well. And we miss Gracie, but she's got big things coming. So, yeah, I'm excited for the future. And I'm predicting, Gracie, you're having a girl. Because you know what? All my favorite women have freaking girls, I've realized.
Yeah. You have boys.
I have boys. So actually, I've got potential... Well, depending who they choose, potential matches. There might be matches as well between, you know, daughters. Who knows?
You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
Although my son has been kissing his cousin a lot. Like, he's obsessed with his cousin. She is beautiful. And my sister-in-law is, like, really freaked out by it. I'm like, it's fine. We'll just take photos and, like, make them awkward when they're 18.
I don't know. I feel like we need to add another boy into the mix. There's an offset at the moment. Well, technically it's even. We got two girls and two boys in our little friend group.
That. And I think that you're going to be great parents no matter what, but I could see a little dude running around with them.
Oh, yeah. We've got both bases covered. Kimberly's got the energy for a boy. I don't, but we don't. She would be she's going to be a good mom no matter what. But yeah, she's got good boy energy, which I'm grateful for because if that happens.
You got your bases covered, Gracie. Really.
Yeah.
Because I tell you what, boys. That said, baby number 2, Louis, is for the moment a little more chilled.
That's good.
No, I'm obsessed with you guys. Like I think the number one piece of feedback I get from the podcast is that people just love listening to us chat because it's like sitting at the table with us. But it's not like it's not a ruse. We're just like friends. And so it's cool that we get to do this. And hanging out with Taylor Wiles over the weekend. It's wild for me because I was never in the same like racing bracket as you guys were, but I always looked up to the three of you, and I never got to like be teammates with you guys on the road or race with you much on the road, but I still somehow managed to wiggle my way into being friends with all three of you. So I feel that I've really won in life, and cycling has brought me, I don't know, three of the best friends that I could ask for. So it's pretty cool. So that's what I'm obsessed with. I'm gonna cry.
Oh, that's really cool. Oh, I feel like I've wiggled my way into this podcast over the last couple of years. So thank you, Abby.
You were definitely chosen.
We picked you years in advance. So we were like, who can we convince to do this podcast with us?
Oh, that's nice. I'm definitely obsessed with this friendship of the four of us too. I'm really grateful because, like cycling relationships are so strange. You hang out with this team for a year or even many years. You have every meal together sometimes for weeks on end, which means that you have really deep conversations, and sometimes you're telling your teammates more personal things that you would even tell your good friends at home just because of the time that you're spending together and the intense experiences you're having. And then when you leave the sport, and I know you two can relate to this, you lose that group really quickly. And it's not because it's personal. It's just because some people are still in their cycling bubble and you're in a different phase of life, and you can reconnect sometimes, but generally they were just situational friends. So it's actually really special to find true friends in no matter whatever you're doing, but sport for us. So I'm really grateful for that. But I'm also just obsessed with the Spring Classics. Like I feel like this has been a really good season of racing. In some ways my heart has hurt a little bit because even though I'm like 3 years out of racing, I'm like wishing I could see how I would have matched up against some of these riders nowadays. It just looks so hard, but it looks so fun, and it's just been really fun to watch it as well. And maybe being pregnant is, like, we've talked about it off the podcast a little bit as a group, but I think that's a little bit confronting in that you're like, yeah, I'm really far away from that now. I wish I was fit again. So
about as far away as you can possibly be.
I'm happy and I'm glad to be where I am right now. But it's like a lot of mixed feelings this spring. But I've, on the whole, absolutely loved the racing so far, and we've still got a few good ones left.
It has been such a good spring, and I feel like it's even better because we went into the spring thinking, SD Worx is just going to wipe the floor with everyone again like they did last year, and that has not happened with like the exception of 2 races. It's been really dynamic racing, so I feel like that's like really because of how last year went and how we thought this year was going to go. It's even better, if that makes sense. Like it's just even more exciting because it's like, oh wait, we were wrong. Like that can't last, and it didn't last, and yeah. Watch them win Paris-Roubaix. They can't.
I told you, that's the race that will elude them. A lot has eluded them this year, but that's the one.
All right, well, we'll be back to talk about Paris-Roubaix next week. Thanks, everyone, so much for listening. And thanks, you two, for being my friends.
Thanks for being my friend.